Welcome to Defending Our Children with host Craig Sawman Sawyer, former Navy SEAL and federal agent, and Executive Director Forrest Seeley, both of Veterans for Child Rescue, an NGO actively engaged in the fight against child trafficking. Defending Our Children is the show that empowers the people with the information you need to know.
Welcome, everyone, to Defending Our Children. We have with us today Lara Logan. I don't think she needs any introduction whatsoever, but for those of you who have somehow been on another planet for the last couple decades, she is from South Africa. She is a famous journalist, and she has been everywhere exposing truth. She has been an embedded journalist in the war zones, and she has brought about much truth that we celebrate in our family, certainly, and all those that I know celebrate her voice, her passion, and her moral courage to speak truth. She's been widely persecuted for speaking truth where it was not wanted yet, or shine the light where it was not wanted. But she keeps being proven right, and we celebrate her. So everyone, please welcome to the show, Miss Lara Logan. Lara, please let anybody know anything more that you want them to know about you before we kick into gear. But I look forward to having a great show about the children and what's happening in our country.
Craig, actually, the most important thing for me that people know about me is that I'm my happiest when I am telling someone else's story, because as a journalist, that's what I was born to do. And that's kind of my purpose, God's purpose. I feel like I'm fulfilling God's purpose for me when I'm doing that. So I prefer to be where you are, interviewing someone and having them tell their story. But part of what I do is, over the years, I've become a voice both in my stories and outside of that for the people who can't speak for themselves. And so that's really why I'm here.
Okay. Well, man, you've been through it, and we see so many things happening with the children. One of the things that we've uncovered is a lot of the funding. We've started stepping on their money, and so many people that are destroying our nation politically and through other means seem to be getting a lot of their funding through the porn industry, we're learning, through child trafficking, and they launder a lot of their money through real estate. And there's so many things that are happening. The border is widely exploited and wide open. We know the government is trafficking children. There are contracts to do that. So many people making the money on it. There's the grooming in the schools. And it's just, I call it the war on children, Lara, because it is a full out, apparent assault upon the most precious and the innocent. They seem to be the prime target of this whole depraved time that we're in. And I thought, man, let's have Lara on the show because, man, she's got unique access and unique experience and perspective. And I know you love the little ones. And I just thought, man, let's let her have a chance to speak about what she's seen out there. So what do you think in relation to the children and how it ties in? What have you seen out there? What do you think people need to know, Lara?
So first thing I would say is you're right. I'm a mama bear, and I will fight to the death. Not just for my children, but for your children, right? And especially for children who can't fight for themselves. You know, the idea that we have unaccompanied minors showing up at the southern border in the hundreds of thousands, and I've seen it with my own eyes, right? Some of them are babies. Some of them are just barely able to walk. And some of them, it doesn't matter if they're 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 12, 13. I mean, these are children. And to see them coming to this country with no idea where they're going most of the time, many of whom have never met their sponsors. There's a great misconception in this country that has been created by our elected leaders and by the federal government. And that is the idea that this family reunification program is about reuniting families, because there are people all over America who think, well, that's a pretty noble thing, right? I mean, I'm a mother, I'm a father, an aunt, or whatever, right? Grandparent, or I'm just a decent human being. Who wants a family to be separated because, maybe parents came here illegally years ago and they need to, reunite with their children? Well, no one in their right mind would say, I think that's a bad thing. So this was an easy sell for the Obama administration. Suddenly, out of nowhere, in 2014 and 15, we had this unaccompanied minor crisis. And there were all these kids showing up without their parents. And I don't know if anybody else thought this was odd. I mean, I just thought it was the most odd thing about it was that nobody was talking about how strange it was that suddenly out of nowhere, this was a massive problem, such a problem that the Obama administration, had to change the law really and make exceptions for children to come and be reunited with their parents. And that sounded reasonable to many people, I think, regardless of political persuasion. But what is happening for the last few years under the Biden administration has got nothing to do with family reunification. In fact, if you look at a woman called Shauna Harris, she's the Secretary for Children, Families and Children in Florida, in the state of Florida. She testified recently in a Senate committee that when Florida looked into the children the unaccompanied minors that had come into their area under her jurisdiction, she found that less than 10%, her agency found that less than 10% of those children were going to their parents. And most of them were going to people that they did not know. Muckraker is a journalist organization. They've got some very significant film that's coming out, and they've let a little bit out. I've spoken to some of the filmmakers, some of the guys working on this. They're going door to door to some of these addresses, and they're finding unaccompanied minors who came to this country, who most Americans think are coming here for the American dream, and they're being forced to have sex against their will. They're telling the Muckraker journalists, we don't know who the sponsors are. We don't know these people. Please, can you help us? There's another organization, Sylvia Ramos is an incredible woman in Florida. She's been working, she's El Salvadorian, and she's been working on this issue for decades. She's telling myself and others that she's got girls on the street who are committing petty crimes just so they can be arrested, begging to be sent home. Okay, you look at the leaders of Guatemala. I mean, what does it take? More than 70% of the unaccompanied minors coming to the border come from Guatemala at the moment, right? This is more than 500,000 kids under the current administration. And you have the leader of Guatemala saying, why are you taking our children? Their parents want them back. And yet somehow there's no curiosity in our media. All those great investigative journalists out there, by the way, Craig, all those journalists who earn a regular salary, who have the full weight of a corporation behind them, right? Who don't have anything to do on a daily basis except their one job, which is to be a real journalist. And they have zero interest in the fact that we have hundreds of thousands of children that are unaccounted for, that the federal government doesn't apply even the most basic standards when it comes to maintaining the safety and security of these children, that they allow people to be sponsors by sending a photocopy, like just a photograph, a text message. You can take a photograph of someone's ID, you can text that and say it's yours, and you can sponsor a child in America today. And the Department of Health and Human Services has been doing this for years. But what they've been doing now is they have passed a rule change, and they're actually making this legal. So, what we have seen with this administration is that from the moment they came in, they had a plan to dramatically increase the scale of migration, of illegal immigration into this country. A big part of that is these unaccompanied minors, and they are using our tax dollars. You said in the very beginning of this segment, you said that you're going after the money, and you mentioned the porn industry. You mentioned a number, trafficking is one of them. And what you touched on briefly, but I think deserves much more of our attention, is that we are funding this with our tax dollars. Not only is it going, coming direct from the federal government, but this is being channeled into non-governmental organizations. And, there's a sense of betrayal, I think, that every one of us has. Like when you find out, say, that a member of a cartel is trafficking kids. Well, you don't expect much from the member of a cartel. These are criminal organizations, and they're ultra violent, and these are the worst of the worst, right? People are evil. But when you find out, wait, it's Child Protection Services is trafficking kids in this country, and they're an agency set up to protect children. Well, that feels like a kick in the guts, right?
Yes, it
because
does.
you're
It's
the people.
demoralizing.
That's right. And you're the people whose only job is to protect children, but you're trafficking them. How can we allow this to happen? And that's the same thing here. Non-governmental organizations, whether they're Catholic charities or Jewish organizations or many other non-governmental organizations, we expect them to adhere to a higher moral standard, and they're betraying the children they're supposed to protect.
Yes, ma'am. Stay tuned, everybody. We'll be right back with a lot more from Lara Logan.
Hey, Tim James here. You know, when I was 37 years old, I had some severe gastrointestinal issues. I was tired, fatigued, wasn't feeling good, skin issues. My health was a mess. Let's just put it that way. Now I'm turning 52 this year, and I have abundant energy. I'm able to trail run and kick the butts of my 22 and 24-year-old sons. Yep, that's right. And do push-ups and all this other fun stuff. How did I do it? Well, one key ingredient, if you want to get healthy, if you want to get your energy back, you want to get your vitality back, is real nutrition. Our soils have been so over-farmed, 85% of the nutrition is gone today, and then the rest is processed out through these processing plants. So what we have created is a formula called Green 85 juice formula. You can take 1 scoop in the morning, and we suggest you do another one in the afternoon about a half an hour before dinner, and you will revitalize your health. You will get your health back. You will cut your hunger cravings, and you're going to actually cut your grocery bill in half. This product will literally pay for itself because you cannot eat as much food because your cells are now getting the nutrition they need. Go to chemicalfreebody.com/DOC. That's chemicalfreebody.com/DOC. Get Green 85 today and energize your life and your health so that you can feel as good as I do and Craig does and Forrest. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much.
Welcome back, everyone, to Defending Our Children. We are on with Lara Logan. We are talking about what's happening with the children now. Lara, you're talking about the border, how it is being exploited. Man, friends of mine in Customs and Border Patrol are walking around with their hands on their head asking, what have we done? What are we allowing? What are we allowing on our watch? What is happening to our nation? They see the children come across with sometimes just an address safety pin to their underwear. And they used to do rapid DNA tests right there on the border, and for good reason. And that was immediately waived upon the entrance of the Biden administration.
Oh, yeah.
So why would they do that? It doesn't make any sense. If you're acting in good faith, if you love the children, if you're acting from a position of love and compassion, you do not allow children to fall into harm's way. So what do you make of the motive? You know quite a bit more than most people behind the scenes of who's doing what. And we try not to talk too much about political parties, but what are you seeing as far as motive, big picture behind why this has been allowed and even orchestrated to be this meat grinder for children to be brought in to our country? And I say real quick, God help us when children need to be rescued from what's happening to them in our beloved USA, which is supposed to be a sanctuary from those things, by the way. So with that, I'll give you the mic.
Well, Craig, one thing I would say is this really is a question for the Biden administration. It's kind of frustrating that the people who are responsible for this are not held to account, right? And I don't like to speculate. I'm not a prophet. I don't look into people's minds. You see a lot of people on TV saying, Trump believes this and Biden believes that. How do you know?
Right.
How do you know? I mean, I just don't find those people credible because they're speaking with authority about things that essentially are unknowable for the most part. What we can look at, right? So what I do is I try to concentrate on the facts. So let's look at some of the facts here. You're 100% right. Border Patrol agents, Customs and Border Protection. I mean, these people, if you look at the suicide rates, they're higher, I believe, than they've ever been in the history of that agency. And recruitment rates are down, across, whether it's the Department of Defense and beyond, right? All of our agencies are struggling because of the policies of the people in power. And this is not accidental. These are not things that just happen because of, one of my very, very, very worst things is when I see people explain things away through incompetence and failure. Oh, this is a failure of leadership. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Can you be that blind to the reality? Because let's start with a few of the facts. I mean, the Biden administration brought open border ideologues from the Open Societies Foundation into their administration from the very, very beginning. They also sent out Jake Sullivan and another woman who used to work for Hillary Clinton. Her name escapes me right now, but they sent out two emissaries that went across Latin America, sending out the dog whistle to the cartels and other trafficking and criminal organizations, letting them know that the border was going to be open. They began reopening and rebuilding facilities that had been long closed under the Trump administration. And they let everybody know they were going to be having a more humane policy. So as we've seen the death rates of people crossing the southern border go through the roof, we've seen the rates of children dying go through the roof. We know that unaccompanied minors are disappearing into the hands of traffickers. It is now not even in dispute that multiple whistleblowers from the federal government have come forward to show that there are people on the criminal watch list for transnational criminal organizations, members of Serbian gangs and MS-13 and others who are being allowed to sponsor children, right? Violent criminals are being allowed to sponsor children under this administration. So we know that these things are happening. We know the Biden administration is aware, and yet they haven't stopped it. In fact, what they've done is make it easier for these people to do this. So that to me speaks for itself, right? Because if you choose, not only do you, you've had plenty of opportunity at this point to correct your actions. If you have a problem with this, if it bothers you in any way, if you want to stand up and admit that this is wrong, you've had more than enough time and opportunity to do so. And they've chosen not to do that. So the logical conclusion for me is that you have the outcome that you wanted. You have the policy and you have the outcome that you wanted, because you have never ever said that you have a problem. In fact, what you have done is say repeatedly that there is no crisis at the southern border, right? Because what you're doing is implementing a globalist policy, which is the United Nations 2000, I believe it was 2018, but it's the Global Compact on Migration. That's the policy that everybody needs to look up. It's all over the internet. You can see it. The UN hasn't hidden it. And they use the language of migration versus illegal immigration, the same language that the Biden administration has implemented, right? Because what they're letting you know is they made migration a human right. And they are letting you know that that human right supersedes your sovereign rights. The rights bestowed on each and every one of us by God that are enshrined in the Constitution of this country are being obliterated by the globalists, right? Because they put themselves above God. And that brings me to something that I think is very important for people to understand. It changed a lot for me when I understood this. You said in the very beginning that this is a war on children. I would say to you that this is a war on God. And children are first in line to suffer as a target, because the greater the pain that you can inflict on God's children, the greater the victory over God, and the greater the reward for you in the realm of the occult and Satanism, which is really what we're talking about. In spiritual warfare, you are rewarded and you rise in the ranks of very, very dark organizations. The greater pain and suffering you can inflict on God. And the number one way that people are able to do that is by attacking God's children. The younger they are, the closer they are to God. And so what you're really looking at, we know this is a spiritual war. Anyone who doesn't see it that way is, quite frankly, either godless or they're in denial, or they're ideologically blinded for their own self-serving reasons. Either way, I don't really care about those people. It's up to each and every one of us to figure this out. We've got to be right with God. And if people don't believe that's true, well, that's okay. They can find out for themselves. I mean, I just know, the thing that I know is that this is happening not just on Border Patrol's watch. It's happening on all of our watch. Right. And we somehow have gotten used to saying, well, children get trafficked, whether it's across the southern border or inside the United States, because make no mistake, American children, girls and boys, are not exempt from this. Right. There's a massive amount of trafficking with American children. This is no longer a cross-border international problem. This is a problem right here at home. And the United States is the number one destination in the world for trafficking of children. And so that is something that you can't just stay blind to that and think you're going to escape accountability, in my humble opinion. Okay. That's just my view on it. What I know is there's more than enough information out there at this point. There's more than enough victims that are trying to tell their stories. And what I have found to be particularly galling is that a lot of the organizations that claim to represent victims, when I try to work with them to raise the voices of victims, they're the ones preventing them from speaking out. And they do it by saying we have to protect the victims, but the victims want to be acknowledged. I mean, I was a victim of gang rape and sodomy, and I know what it feels like to be forced to carry that dirty little secret, right? As if it's your burden alone, as if somehow you're the one that's responsible for this. No, this is not my burden. If we are allowing children, the most vulnerable of all people in our society, to be preyed on, and not only are we allowing it, but we're funding it. And what they have reduced Border Patrol agents to is basically logisticians for the cartels and for the people who are trafficking kids. That's what they do. They arrange their flights. They basically process their paperwork and arrange their flights and get them to where the cartels want them to go. And we pay for it. And our leaders lie about it. And all of this it's not by accident. It's not by failure. It's not by incompetence. It is policy. And it is the policy of the Open Society Foundation and those people who believe in a global world and global laws and global institutions and global order. These are the people who are driving this, and they know exactly what they're doing.
Yes, ma'am. Folks, Lara Logan telling it to you straight. Stand by. We'll be right back with a lot more.
Are you or a loved one struggling with addiction? Rancho Milagro Recovery is an accredited drug and alcohol addiction recovery program treating the whole person through their lifelong recovery process. Our process incorporates both medication-assisted treatment and psychological therapy to help all aspects of an individual's mind, body, and spirit. Our lavish accommodation sits on 60 acres of outdoor greatness where your privacy and discretion is our utmost concern. Find lasting recovery and walk away from addiction one step at a time. RanchoMilagroRecovery.com.
Welcome back, everyone, to Defending Our Children. We're on with Lara Logan. She is bringing the truth like she always does. Lara, we're talking about child trafficking. What does trafficking, in your experience, really mean? What does it entail? What do the people need to know that's happening to the children? What does it all look like?
Well, I mean, Craig, very simply, what you're talking about is not just child rape, but also child torture, right? And very often murder. I spoke to a Mexican investigator once who had been working in this for many, many years, and we were in a city in Mexico, Tenancingo, that literally is founded on generations of child traffickers. I had spoken to a trafficker who, when he was 12 years old, his father and his grandfather took him on a drive to the Mexican state of Chihuahua, where they bought a number of girls and brought them back to Tenancingo because they have an annual festival there where they parade the new young girls, the virgins, through the town, and people in the town choose who they're going to rape that night. I spoke also to some of the girls. I interviewed some of the girls who are being trafficked in that city. And this was one of the worst interviews I've ever had to sit through, because I only realized in that interview that most of the time when I speak to people, whether it's, Yazidi girls that were sex slaves, in northern Iraq and so on, that normally they've been rescued or they've somehow the traumatic event is past. Now that doesn't mean, that they're healed, but at least they have the opportunity, right? They've been saved from their torment and the hell that they were living in. But with these two girls, they were going to walk out that room that night and be raped yet again. And I don't think that people really understand that, some of these girls are sold by their families because they're so poor. And what these girls told me was both of them, was their mother was the one that came to them and said, I need you to do this for your family. They think they're going to a job, or they think they're going, to do something that's going to help feed their brothers and sisters and something that's going to make their parents proud. And then they find that they're kept as prisoners. They are raped 7 days a week. They are never, ever, ever able, even if they're sick, they don't get vacations, they don't get weekends, they don't get afternoons off. You take their identity, you take their family, you take their freedom, you take their dreams, you take all of their hope, because there's no way out. They can never come back from it. Many of them are turned into addicts. Many of them are violently abused. Some of the poorer girls and boys are sent into the porn world, into the very dark world on the dark web, into areas of sadistic pornography. There's horrific things like where sometimes they cut the veins in a certain way so that for pedophiles who like a blood show, is what it's called. They cut the veins so that there'll be a massive blood show when they're raped to death. And they do this not just with teenagers and young children, but with babies, not just toddlers and infants, but actual newborn babies. And there are many other ways in the genre of sadistic pornography. There's many other ways that they make these children suffer. The average age, I learned from investigators, that the amount of time that a child survives once they're trafficked is around 2 years, and that's merciful in some ways. The Mexican investigator I spoke to said in most of the child pornography, I asked him the average age of a child, and he said around 5 years old. I asked him if they're very violent, and he said he thought about it, and he said mostly with the boys. They do often kill the boys on camera. And, this is just one part of the trafficking network. Another part of it is, one of the cases that I've been looking at very closely is a young girl who was trafficked in the United States foster care system. Her foster father was a police detective. She had 17 children by him. She gave birth to twins at 9 years old. This is well documented. CPS documented the birth of her children. And many of these children, especially when they're born into things like, foster families, are never registered. They don't officially exist. This is an area that intelligence agencies call human farming. This is something that happens all the time. You have, for example, poor girls that will come in from the rural areas, or, unsophisticated communities that go to give birth in the hospitals, and they'll be told their child has died, and their child did not die in childbirth. The children are taken from them. This happens in South Africa, where I was born and raised, and it doesn't just happen there. It happens all over the world. There's also the very serious reality of what life is like right here in the United States. I have very close friends of mine, people, a great organization that I know that you know very well too, Craig. I don't know if I can say their name publicly, but I'll tell you about one of the cases of a young girl that they rescued. She was sold in a slave market in Fort Worth, Texas, naked, in a cage with a serial number tattooed to her. And she was not alone. This was a slave market with many other girls. And this is happening. You think that's just happening in Fort Worth? No, there are satanic churches that are underneath real church, Christian churches all across this country. This girl, at one point after she escaped, she was then trafficked by the youth pastor in her church, who was running a satanic cell underneath that church and doing it with a local police officer who was working with her. At one point, this girl was sold to a cartel hitman, or sicario. And once he figured out that she would be useful to him in helping to kill people, he had her kill 64 different people. And one of the things he did was he put razor blades inside her fake nails. And if she did not kill these men quickly enough, he would come into the room and he would torture them to death. And the whole time that he was torturing them, she would be chained up naked. He would make her watch, and he would tell her all the time, see how he's suffering? This is your fault. You did this because you didn't do what you were supposed to do. You didn't kill him quickly. So this is on you. And I don't know how much your viewers can take, but the first man he did this to, he beheaded him. He put the head between her legs, and he gave her instructions that she had to peel the skin from his skull or she wouldn't be unchained or fed or anything until she'd done that. And it took her, she said, 3 days. Now, this is a well-documented story. This girl, she saw multiple specialists, medical specialists. Her medical history was documented. They found evidence of the beatings and, the scars and all the things that she said happened to her. She had the physical scars to prove it. This was investigated by people who have been working in counter trafficking for decades. And also, one of them is an attorney. And these are very serious people who are very committed to what they do. They think the world of you and the work that you do. And I have known the man who runs that organization. I have known him for decades. So this is not something, I'm not coming out here giving you second, third, fourth hand information. I'm giving you information that comes firsthand from the front line of what this really looks like. And I think it's shameful. It's absolutely shameful that there are not more journalists out there that are interested in documenting this. Instead, we just throw the victims to the dogs, right? Because it's their word against someone else's word or whatever. We just let them flounder. There's satanic ritual abuse, there's interfamilial trafficking. There's a lot of other areas that I know that you're also very familiar with.
Yes, ma'am. Well, there are so many that need to be bringing the truth. And I think that's one of the things you bring is the inspiration to do that with no fear, with boldness, with care, to be accurate, but without fear. And so many people need that. So this is the halfway point.
Craig.
Yes,
That's
ma'am.
the only one
It's
fear,
clear,
right?
and that's why we celebrate Laura Logan in this house. But this is the halfway point in the show. And before we got to cut to a commercial break, please let everybody know how to find you online and support what you do.
Well, you can find me on X at Lara Logan on X, and also, on Truth Social and on Wimkin. If you haven't got the social media app Wimkin, they're pretty amazing. They don't sell your data, and they're the only ones who defied the January 6th Select Committee when it comes to user data. So they're worth looking at. And I'm also on Locals and Rumble.
All right. Thank you. Folks, stay tuned. We have a lot more left to go with Laura Logan.
Here to review this V4CR coffee, Veterans for Child Rescue. Getting rid of child trafficking all around the world.
Rescue Roast. This is being offered strictly to fund our operations. We found a great roaster, chosen our 3 favorite flavors. And our light, medium, and dark roast, we're offering it right now in pre-ground form. If you want to enjoy it in K-Cups, we have stainless steel cups on our website, and they are reusable. Just take the coffee and pour it into the cup. Close it up, put it in the machine. Oh yeah. So go to our website right now, v4cr.org. Order as much as you want on our shop page. We're grateful for your continued support. We're excited about what this means as far as boosting the funding for our operations. Thank you so much for your continued support. God bless.
Welcome back, everyone, to Defending Our Children. We're on with Laura Logan. Man, she is bringing it. I'm enjoying this show. Laura, one of the things that really disturbs me about what people do to children is the intent, the deep spiritual harm. And Jesus himself talked about those who offend the children. And it's the whole scripture about the millstone. It's better to have a millstone tied around your neck and thrown into the sea than to offend one of these little ones. I did a word search. I was looking up the meaning of the word offend, and it means to cause bitterness and resentment in. And when you consider that, it's to take them spiritually out of their natural, high vibrational love, compassion, and hopeful state and drag them down into a bitter and resentful, low vibrational, hate and fear-filled state. That's a spiritual attack on that soul. On the spiritual level, a lot of people understand that who are strong Christians. A lot of regular Americans that may not be educated on that may sound foreign to them. But if you just realize it's to take someone who's loving and compassionate and hopeful, and to destroy that in them and cause them to be broken. And so many times they grow up to become abusers themselves. So it's a multiplication factor. It's so ugly and so nasty, but they use tech in addition to all the other methods. There's so much technology that is being aimed to undermine our children and their path and their lives and their understanding. What do you see there on the tech side, Laura?
Well, Craig, your introduction to that question just reminded me of something that a friend of ours always says. Our friend Boz from Association for Recovery of Children, right? He said to me once that trafficking is how you murder a child without killing them. And I think that's what you're talking about, right? When you take that absolutely precious soul and you damage it so badly that they pray for death, that death is actually merciful. And the only thing that gives me any kind of comfort is knowing that they are then in the hands of their Father, and hopefully, and in a much better place where their suffering, they cannot be tormented anymore by something that is just absolute pure evil. There is no other way to describe it. Boz also says, that the sinner can repent, right? But the wicked spit in the face of God. And I think that's what we're dealing with here, that these people are truly, truly wicked. But maybe even more wicked than them are the people protecting them. I feel like when someone is just pure evil, you recognize them for who they are. But
Yep.
it's the people masquerading, right, as leaders who are protecting those people. It's like it's the non-governmental organizations that are funding the effort to normalize pedophilia. Minor attracted persons is what they're called now, right? It's the psychologists and therapists who are testifying in court cases on behalf of the pedophiles instead of on behalf of the victims. It's these people, right? It's this entire infrastructure that we're building to destroy our children and our society from within, and most importantly, our relationship with our Creator. And a big, big part of that is the technology, which you mentioned, right? Because what we've essentially done is, you imagine, technology has taken, say, pickpocketing, right? That's become bank fraud. I mean, on a global scale. Somebody can walk past you and scan all your credit cards, scan your wallet, and steal everything from you. And they can do that to every single person on earth if you have anything digital on you, right? That's what technology has done. It's brought scale to everything. Say, Hitler could speak to people in Germany, right? But today with technology, if you combine, Instagram with Google and Facebook and so on, he can speak to, billions of people all across the planet at exactly the same time. Well, that's what technology has done to trafficking. It has united this community of Satanists and pedophiles and, criminal organizations. It has given them anonymity. It has given them cover. For some inexplicable reason, we've given them the dark web. I mean, I don't understand it. You've given them a marketplace where they can trade in humans and trade in children and trade in human life and human suffering. People are making money out of this on a scale that is unprecedented in human history. And that word gets thrown around on television a lot, right? And most of the time, it's not warranted. But here, this truly is unprecedented. And what happens when you find your community? You become emboldened, right? And when nobody's really doing anything about it, you become even bolder. So you will find, there will be people across the world, pedophiles across the world, that will participate in the rape, torture, and murder of babies and children together. And say, and cheer each other on and just say what they want, the sickest, darkest things that you can think of, and things that probably, a normal person can't even think of those things. And this doesn't just exist on the dark web. If you think about it, right? This is maybe one of the most important parts for me. If you think about it, when you report child pornography, so you call the child exploitation hotline and you report that. So when they take that information in, They take that, whether it's an email or is it in text, is it in a phone call, is it when you provide the images of child pornography, whether it's a video or photographs, somebody has to store that on their servers, right?
Yep.
And that
It's true.
somebody in 152 countries is Ericsson. So Ericsson now has archives of child pornography. You think that they can't scan that to see who's responsible, to have facial recognition, to see if there are members of governments, members of the military, people of power and influence in corporations and across industry? These people have they hold the databases of child pornography for the child exploitation hotline in 152 countries. What do they not know about people who are involved in this? And by the way, I mean, I know Kamala Harris made that ridiculous statement about the cloud. Okay, there's no cloud. These things, everything that is data is stored. It
Yep.
travels along a physical infrastructure. So whether that's towers or undersea cables or servers or whatever, I mean, and then you have hardware and you have software. And these things are owned by a small number of companies. They know exactly what's moving and when it's moving. And they're not held to account. They're not made to stop it. Why not? Well, Ericsson moves classified information for most of the US government, if not all of it. Is that why? Do they know too much about national security? Do they know too many of our secrets, that they're more powerful maybe than the United States government, that we don't want to hold them to account? I mean, this is a company that has admitted in court to Gold Star families that they provided geolocation data on US soldiers in Iraq to their Islamic terrorist enemies so they could be killed, and they were killed. They paid out hundreds of millions of dollars after admitting fault, and yet they still hold the government contracts for moving classified information. Why?
Yeah.
It's because of what they know. So the technology out there exists, right? All of this happens in a technological space, and yet technology companies have almost complete immunity and protection. We never hold them accountable. We don't even look to them. You know, there are now apps that have been created where traffickers can come, they can walk past your child in a public space and take a 3D image of your child. They just walk around you and they scan you as they go by. You don't even notice. Well, that creates a 3D avatar, which they can then upload onto the internet. Did you know that you don't own your own image? Do you know in cyberspace, there's no Bill of Rights, right? In the digital world, we have no rights because we have allowed this situation to happen, because technology companies have lied to us about how they've obliterated the Fourth Amendment. And as you know, Tucker Carlson said this best. He said, without the Fourth Amendment, right, without the right to privacy, there is no First Amendment. There's no freedom. Privacy is a prerequisite for freedom, but they have obliterated our privacy, and we've allowed them to get away with it and to profit from it. So what do? They put, traffickers can put your image online, they NFT it, get a non-fungible token. So they have now basically patented your child's image, and then they put it on the dark web, and then people pay using 3D Oculus style headset. They pay to rape your child over and over and over. And you know what the traffickers request? They don't want a fake kid. They want an avatar of a real kid.
Yeah. This has to come to a stop, folks. We have to cut to a quick commercial break. Stay tuned. We will be right back.
Hey, Tim James here, founder of ChemicalFreeBody.com, also the health coach for Craig Sawyer and Forrest Seeley. And I want to help working class people get their energy back and quit having all these health issues. Here's the problems. The average person is carrying around 6 to 12 pounds of impacted fecal material in your colon. This is not good. Number 2, we have terrible nutrition because the nutrition has been farmed out of our soils and processed out. Plus, processed foods are killing 4,300 people a day. We need good nutrition. Number 3, our gut microbiome's all jacked up from all these toxins and pesticides and stress. We have to balance that. We also have tremendous amounts of inflammation in the body, and we have an overload of toxins from heavy metals, radiation, and pollution. Craig and I and Forrest got together. We created what we call our Defending Our Health bundle. This is a bundle of our products over here at ChemicalFreeBody.com that will revolutionize your health. We've put them together. Green 85 is going to come in and supply you with all the nutrition you need. Our Gut Detox will take care of all that impacted garbage inside of you and keep it out. Toxin Detox will get the heavy metals, the radiation, and the pollution out. The Nano Silver, the triple action, will start balancing the gut microbiome, and the Turmeric 100 will start reducing inflammation in the body. You put it all together, and working class people can now get their energy back and their health back and start to heal themselves. We need you to be healthy so that you can fight for freedom and fight for these kids. Go to chemicalfreebody.com/DOC and check out the Defending Our Health bundle and all of the other wonderful products that we offer, and we look forward to helping you have the best life ever.
Welcome back, everyone, to Defending Our Children. We're on with Lara Logan. Lara, you're talking about people who are controlling large databases. You know, some people call it the cloud, but it's a computer database that stores all the information online. And we see that absolute power corrupts absolutely. That's a rational, experienced adult sees that absolute power corrupts absolutely. And I agree with people that say, I don't want these corporations like BlackRock to own everything, you know, acting nefariously. But I also say, well, then what about the government, who we're giving unlimited power to as well? And they're acting in a lot of cases even worse. So I think we have to realize we have a constitutional republic. We, the people, need to stand up and assert ourselves, and then we can bring about change. Lara, what say you?
Well, I mean, it is a very interesting point. You know, if you look at these companies, if you look at, say, for example, the Epstein case, you know, Epstein, I mean, basically, it comes to light. Everybody knows that Epstein was trafficking in children on behalf of at least one government, if not multiple governments. And yet we still today don't have any idea who the real victims were. A few have come forward, but we know very, very little. Ghislaine Maxwell, they seized all of her devices. Okay, her phones, her computers, all of those records, they existed somewhere, and yet we still know nothing. And what happens is, you know, people come and testify before Congress, and nothing is ever done because they have information dominance. The same people who are trafficking in kids, they dominate the information space. And so they can make sure that there's no real accountability. Not to mention that this impacts every aspect of our society. So you have police officers, you have school teachers, you have elected officials. I mean, you have all kinds of people that are heavily involved in trafficking and heavily invested in making sure that there is no accountability. And the victims, you know, for the most part, don't seem to matter. They just don't seem to matter. And so people are frustrated with that. I mean, I know people are frustrated with that because the number one issue that people come up to me and talk to me about all the time is child trafficking. I know that this speaks to people all across the country. I find it extraordinary that there are, you know, paid influencers out there and political operatives who see it as an opportunity to attack people. They say, oh, these crazy conservatives or crazy Republicans, the way they go on about the children, isn't it kind of weird? Okay, wait, you actually think that that's a legitimate line of attack. You actually think that people cannot see through that. This should not be a partisan issue. This is an issue that speaks to the moral compass of every single one of us. And people out there, they don't care. They want our leaders to be held to account regardless of which party they're from. I mean, you can pretty much be certain that if Donald Trump was found to be involved in the trafficking of children, that his support base, it's at historic levels. It would dissipate overnight. You'd have the diehards that are left, but nobody wants that kind of person elected. Nobody, right? In fact, one of the things that's reprehensible about the information war against Donald Trump is that of all of the leaders elected, you know, in the last few decades, he did more to combat trafficking than anybody, and it was largely ignored. I mean, you speak to people in counter-trafficking organizations who are legitimately on the front line of this fight, and they are the most grateful for the initiatives by the Trump administration. I'm not saying that because I'm a Trump fan. I'm not saying that to inflate, you know, Trump or to flatter him. I'm saying it because it's a reality. That's the absolute truth, as opposed to we now have an administration in power that admits it cannot account for some 85,000 kids in one calendar year coming across the southern border on their own without their parents. And suddenly the same people that were going absolutely nuts about kids in cages under Trump. And every child, or when there was a child that was lying in the river floating dead with her father, this was, sort of this great sort of stain on the Trump administration. And this had people out in the streets spitting on people. And if you worked for, Homeland Security at that time, you were attacked, and Border Patrol, you were attacked. Those same people don't care that the number of dead children that have died crossing the southern border under this administration, they don't care one bit about them, which tells you they don't really care about these children. There's just no accountability because everything is cast through a political lens. And I get it. This is an election year. Everything's political in an election year. But there are some things that transcend politics. And that's what I've always tried to find. And I've gravitated towards this issue because once I started to know the truth, I couldn't live with myself. I couldn't live with myself if I stayed silent. I don't care what these people say. They'll attack me for everything I've said today. They'll attack you. They'll keep attacking anybody involved in this space. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter. You know why? Because I spoke at a treatment center for kids in Kansas once, and they would have these kids write in a bubble on the wall. Let the kids write something. And one of these boys, I never forget this, he wrote in his bubble, "Am I the only one?" And I that's a cry. That's a cry for help. And these children need to know you're not the only ones and you're not alone. And they need to know that somebody's coming for them. And if we don't do something, they don't have that, right? They don't have that. They're just abandoned and nobody comes for them. And that's a terrible, to be raped day in and day out, to be tortured. I mean, 3-year-old kids chained inside a closet. Craig, you've seen it. You've rescued kids, You know the reality. These kids sit there day after day after day wondering if is somebody going to come for me? Will someone make this stop? And it's got to go beyond that. It's got to go into the corridors of power that are driving and sustaining this. And the technology companies are a huge part of this. If we don't speak up and do something about it now, I don't know. This is just a window that we have. And I don't know how long this window is still going to exist. I really don't. It's not going to be open forever. We are rapidly losing control of the digital space and allowing it to control us. And that's insanity to me.
It is insanity. We're losing everything sacred and precious to us because we have not been involved the way that our founding fathers set us up to be involved. So,
and because we turned our back on God. That's why.
And that is why we don't have the moral courage to get involved. So the good news is we have the chance to turn around if only we just will stand up, fight back, because the little ones are worthy. We can provide them a safer future by standing up and speaking truth and fighting back.
The world of these people is a godless one. Yeah. It's pure evil.
It is. Well, Laura, we understand you have to go, and we appreciate your time and your willingness to speak truth on this show. God bless you and all that you do. We will continue to pray over you and support all that you do. And everyone else, look up Laura online, find her, support her, back her, amplify her voice, because she is a champion for truth.
And the same to you, Craig. I know how much work you've done and how hard you guys, you and Forrest, and all the work that you're doing. It means a lot to a lot of people. They talk about you all the time. I hear your name. So thank you.
Thank you. God bless.
We certainly are grateful for you coming on the show, and we're grateful for the opportunity to do this. A lot of people ask me why I do it, and I looked up one day. I used to say, they're going to fix that. They're going to fix that. And finally, I realized that who is they? Well, they is the people that are on the show today, because
they is us, all of us together.
Yeah. Somebody should do something, and well, you're somebody.
I'm nobody. We're all somebody when we work together, when we unite.
That's the truth. That's the truth. And that's why I think the divide and conquer strategy is being used so extensively to scatter, to use the fear state, to weaken people and destroy their hope so that we do not fight back. So,
but think about it this way, Craig, if you have to work that hard to divide people and keep us divided, well, that means we're united naturally.
Well, I think we're in a season of exposure. For those of us,
season of reveal.
Yes, ma'am. So those of us that shine the light into the dark places, this is a good season right now. It's strange but it's healthy and it's needed. So I celebrate it. We celebrate you. So God bless you, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Welcome back, everyone, to Defending Our Children. Forrest and I here are just remarking about how powerful Lara Logan's voice is, just because it comes from such a place of sincerity. She's a compassionate human being, as we all should be. And she's been around the world and seen some of the worst atrocities going on. And she's had atrocities committed upon her, and she just will not yield to the abusers. And I celebrate that. I find her an inspiration. I hope many get behind her and amplify her voice. Those who want the truth kept quiet, because it exposes their criminal enterprises and slows their abuse and their wealth and their power, they want to silence her. And I think, we can counter that by amplifying her voice, sharing and repeating what she says. She's very careful. She's very accurate and honest. So, man, it's just a privilege to know her, to call her friend, and have her on the show. So she had to punch for another production. She runs a very tight schedule. So we celebrate her time on the show here. So Forrest, how was that for you, brother?
Well, I tell you what, whenever I listen to Lara speak, she is the true essence of journalism. She's curious.
Yeah.
She asks questions, and not a question for the sake of asking a question. When she's going after a story, she's asking the questions that are logical. She's using logical thinking. And so also she brings references that she's personally witnessed. She did talk about firsthand account. So she's gone to the deepest, darkest corners of the world to get information on the story. She's been in places where most people are fearful to walk, even with an armed detail, but that's where she's been. So I like her journalism style, and I think it's a lost style with many of the journalists. When I read a newspaper article or an online article or they don't ask the right questions. They ask what I call softball questions. And I'm not saying you have to ask a tough question. It's, look, if you want
the real questions, the obvious questions. Yeah. That people want to know the answers to.
Yeah.
Well, there are few journalists that my wife and I cheered out loud to, whether online or on TV, because Lara's worked with all the major networks, and we have stood up and cheered out loud for her over her moral courage. And in times when she spoke truth that was obvious and no one else would speak it because there was an arrangement, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. We're not going to talk about this because so many people are benefiting from the harmful and corrupt status quo. And she would point it out and speak truth. And it was so needed that we've stood up and physically yelled out and cheered at the TV in celebration of her. So I think she's an inspiration.
Craig, I find it peculiar because when I watch how she operates, and I know how you and I grew up, this is normal to me. And to watch journalism today and them not ask the questions that somebody like Lara asked, it's very weird to me. And then on the flip side, whenever somebody's asked a question, especially if you're in front of Congress, I like to use that as an example. The answers that they give, nobody ever answers the question. They're not held accountable. Yeah, they sit there and say, the buck stops with me, but I'm not going to answer your question. And it could be a pretty simple question that they're asking. It may not be in the darkest details of an operation that's happening that has top level security. So it's really strange to me the times that we're in, and the fact that she just continues to do that. I'm like you. I stand up and celebrate in front of the television.
Well, we're starved for justice now. I see that by dealing with a lot of people online. People are very upset that those who are ruining everything on a higher scale don't seem to be getting brought to justice, brought to account, and made to answer the questions about their behavior. And it's very frustrating, and I think it's humiliating for the American people It's so upsetting. It's demoralizing. It causes people to lose hope and to give up. And that's a tragedy. It breaks my heart and it angers me to see that happen. So that in that space of a void, a vacuum of truth and accountability and justice, a bold right fighter, truth speaker like her really resonates with people because they appreciate it because they've been starved for it. And when it finally happens, man, it's just like shouting from the, like a beautiful singer singing from the mountaintops, people are like, yes, finally, because we see a lot of obvious wrongdoing in our world. And she talked about curiosity. So many of these journalists are not curious, and they'll ask political figureheads benign questions that are pointless in the face of what's going on. It shows that there's either no situational awareness or there's the deliberate willingness to just change the subject and talk about something that is not pertinent. And so, what'd you have for breakfast this morning? Where, the Rome is burning and they're being asked these softball benign questions. It just doesn't work. And so that's why she's so important.
I totally agree. And again, I go back to, this seems like normal, logical behavior to you and I in the world that we live in. We live what I believe is a very logical world. We ask logical questions. We face issues every single day, but we always continue to ask logical questions. And what we don't do is we never pretend that the world is not burning. We recognize the world is burning. And I think that's very important. And you kind of have to keep a calm head about it. It's real easy to get overwhelmed by what's happening in the world. And I think the content that you listen to and consume, they maybe fuel that as well. So for me, I'm very careful about what I consume because I understand we've got work to do. We got things that we've got to deal with. And that's what I like looking at Laura. The world could be burning, but she's still standing, leaning into the fight.
Yeah. Well, look, you're talking about recognizing what's going on, having that situational awareness. And there are a lot of things in our society that are geared very specifically to keep us from recognizing what's going on. There's all kinds of information warfare. There's disinformation. The psychological experts will admit there's programming to program people's minds, not to see, not to perceive. There are toxins in all of our products and our food. And so we have a mutual friend, Tim James, who's made products specifically to help people detox physically so that biologically our bodies are healthy, our minds can work better, and we have a better chance of recognizing. First, we have to get to the right sources of the information. We have to be curious and seek it now. But if your body is healthy, if you detox your mind and all the toxins that cause the heavy metals that cause your brain not to function well, and you detox and you detach from so many of the electronic means that are not healthy and not productive and not giving truth, then you do have a lot better chance to relax, be healthy, and your brain to function as optimally designed to function. So look, there's one right now, Green 85. You want to talk about that for just a second before we wrap?
Yes, our good friend Tim James, he's created a product called Green 85, and this is basically a replacement powder for juicing. And instead of having to go through the whole juicing process, all you do is pour this into a shaker, 1 scoop into a bottle with the shaker, shake it up, drink it, tastes really good. You get all the essential vitamins that you need. You can actually go buy it at chemicalfreebody.com. And if you use the discount code, you will get a reduced price on this product. And I encourage people to try Green 85. And there's some other products that he offers, but check out chemicalfreebody.com and check out Green 85.
Yeah, very clean stuff. And he started making that because he couldn't find other people that were making clean enough product that he wanted for himself. So, that's a great source. Forrest, thank you for co-hosting today, brother, as always. And all the rest of you, God bless you and all that you do. And join us next time on Defending Our Children.
We hope you've enjoyed listening to Defending Our Children, the show that empowers the people with the information you need to know. Learn more on how to get involved and make a difference at vetsforchildrescue.org, because the children are worthy.